So I'm hitting a milestone in a couple of months. I'm turning 50. And while I know that's just a number, it does cause some reflections. And over the last many months, I've been asking the question, what are the implications of that? What does it look like to enter new seasons of life? What are my 50s for? Things like that. And it led me to buying this little book. And it's by Marcus Cicero, who was a Roman consul. And he wrote this in 45 BC. And he actually wrote a bunch of stuff around that period of time. He spent his later years writing and is one of the philosophers of the era. And this little book is called How to Grow Old. So fascinating. So I picked it up, and he breaks the process of aging or growing old into eight different ideas that he shares about that. And we won't go into all of them. You can get the book. It's a pretty easy read if you're interested. But I want to talk about the first one. Because it really it's obvious stuff. Like, how does a book like this last so long and still have value? Well, it's not because he's writing something that is original. I think he's writing something that is foundational, that is always true in a way. In fact, this book has lived throughout history by getting reprinted over and over and over. People keep passing it around. Maybe that's what I'm doing right now. But it actually has a pretty interesting history in America. When America was formed, one of the things that Benjamin Franklin did was start a printing company. It was the first printing company in America. And it turns out this book was the first book he printed. So this book is the first book printed in America. It has that kind of place in people's hearts. So principle number 1 from Cicero is this, and I'm just going to read it to you. It's a short paragraph. So he says, a good old age begins in youth. Oh, that makes sense. Of course it does. But he goes on. Cicero says that the qualities that make the latter years of our lives productive and happy should be cultivated from the beginning, or as early as possible is how I might interpret that. As soon as you can grab a hold of this idea, like start cultivating the habits and the patterns and the qualities that allow us to age well. What are those? He says they are moderation, wisdom, clear thinking, enjoying all that life has to offer. These are the habits that we should learn while we are young, since they will sustain us as we grow older. Then there's a sentence that I love this. It says, miserable young people do not become happier as they grow older. That's true. So, first thing out of Cicero's mouth, the first thing that this book suggests, this book that has been passed on over and over and over, is that in order to grow old well, you want to start that as soon as possible. You want to create your life in a way that allows you to focus on those things that will help you in moderation, wisdom, clear thinking, enjoying all that life has to offer. Why these things? Why did he make this particular list? And I don't presume that this is a descriptive list or a prescriptive list, this is the entire list. I think there's all kinds of ways to think about this, but he pulled out these ones, and they're good ones. Moderation, the ability to control yourself, self-control. And that idea to me is simply that we want to root out our automatic behaviors, the impulsive behaviors, things that seem to control us instead of us controlling them. And I got to tell you, there's lots of them, and I'm still finding them. Places in my life where I'm still behaving out of impulse rather than with the awareness or the noticing of my own behaviors that will allow me to change them, or ask the question, was that helpful? Instead of just having to do it. Wisdom. What is wisdom? We know it's not knowledge. Knowledge is different than wisdom, but what is wisdom? And oh my gosh, so much can be said about this, but simply I think of wisdom as being the capacity to hold on to things that appear to be mutually exclusive simultaneously. It's the idea of not living only in an either or world, but a both and world. It's not either this or this, it's both this and this, and being able to do that when it's appropriate. We call this dualistic and non-dualistic thinking. Fabulous subject to explore. Clear thinking. Cicero suggests that you want to curate the capacity for clear thinking as soon as you can so that you can grow old well. Clear thinking is the ability to find what's true, but couple it to what you want as well. In fact, we've talked about this book already. Oh, I put it away. Sorry. In Ray Diallo's book, Principles, and I talked a little bit about that in a video previously. His leading principle, his core principle is something like, you've got to, number one, you have to be able to figure out what's true. Number two, you have to know what you want. And those are both hard. You got to figure out what's true and you got to know what you want. Then you have to go after what you want in light of what's true. That's clear thinking. The greater capacity you have for that, the better you'll be at growing old. And then enjoying all that life has to offer. St. Augustus, who was one of the great theologians of the Christian tradition, said, all things, if connected to God, are good, but if disconnected from God, are just part of the great nothingness. I think that's a way of saying we are free to enjoy all that life has to offer, but we want to connect it to what is good and not go after it in ways that are compulsive, that lack wisdom, that lack clear thinking. So I found that encouraging in one way, that the process of growing old, the way to do it well is within my grasp even today. And I know maybe I already am old, but I got time to keep working on these principles, and so do you. I just wanted to share that with you today. Have you started, are you willing to start doing the work now of growing old?